Eleanor lay in bed, her frail frame almost lost beneath the warm layers of blankets, her eyes weary but determined. The room was silent, save for the soft sound of wind brushing against the window. Lucy sat beside her, holding her mother's hand tightly, trying to convince her to go to the hospital, but Eleanor simply shook her head, a faint, sad smile appearing on her face. "No, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice frail but unwavering. "I don't want to go to the hospital. I just want to be here, at home. This is where I feel at peace." Lucy looked at her mother, anxiety filling her heart. "But Mom, you need treatment. The doctor said you can't." "Lucy," Eleanor interrupted, gently squeezing her hand. "I've lived long enough to know what I need. All I want now is to stay here, surrounded by memories, and by you and your siblings." Lucy fell silent, not wanting to argue further. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, gazing distantly at some faraway place. "Lucy, I need you to call Michael and Claire. Tell them to come home." Lucy hesitated, furrowing her brow. "I've called them a few times, Mom, but they said they're busy and haven't been able to arrange things." Eleanor was silent for a moment, a hint of sadness crossing her face. They don't realize I've been preparing everything for you all. There's more I want to leave you, more than you think." Lucy looked at her mother, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and concern. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Eleanor only gave a weak smile, her eyes holding a deep, guarded secret. "You'll understand, once all three of you are here." She paused, her breathing becoming shallower, but she continued in a whisper. "Everything I want you to know is in that box." Lucy hesitated, sensing the urgency in her mother's voice. "I'll call them again," she replied softly, trying to suppress the rising worry within her. Lucy stepped out of the room, took a deep breath, and quickly dialed Michael. The phone rang for a while before he picked up, his voice sounding a bit curt. "Lucy, what's going on? I already told you. I'm busy." Lucy took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Michael, Mom's really weak. She keeps asking to see you and Claire, and she's mentioned something about inheritance. I don't understand it, but she says there's something she wants to leave to all three of us." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Michael's voice took on a hint of skepticism. "Inheritance? What are you talking about? Mom's lived simply her whole life. You know that." Lucy tried to explain. "I don't know either, but she keeps saying she has more than we think. She keeps mentioning some kind of box, and says it holds everything." Michael sighed, though his tone softened a bit. "All right, I'll try to arrange things and come back as soon as I can." Hanging up, Lucy then dialed Claire. The phone rang, and finally, Claire answered, her voice sounding a bit weary. "Lucy, are you calling again? I told you, I'm really busy." Patiently, Lucy explained. "Claire, Mom's really weak. She wants to see all three of us together. Immediately. She's talking about some kind of box and says she's left something for us." Claire was silent for a moment, then let out a slight, almost dismissive laugh. "Lucy, what are you saying? Mom doesn't have anything of value. She's lived modestly her whole life. What inheritance?" "I don't know, but she's acting like it's something very important. Please, come back. Don't miss this." Claire sighed deeply, then finally relented. "All right, I'll make arrangements." That evening, Lucy sat beside her mother's bed, her eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. Each breath seemed weaker than the last. Her eyes barely open, Eleanor strained to lift her hand, clasping Lucy's gently, her breath barely a whisper. "Lucy, I'm sorry. I couldn't wait for them," her voice faltered, as if fading into the distance. "The box, it holds the secret I wanted to share with all of you." Lucy held her mother's hand tightly, trying to keep calm and listen, but Eleanor couldn't say any more. Her eyes slowly closed, and her final breath faded. Her frail hand slipped away, leaving Lucy sitting there, overcome with pain and regret swelling in her chest. Her mother's words about the mysterious box, about everything she had left for the three of them, now turned into unanswered questions. On the drive back to town, Michael stared out the window, his mind tangled with conflicting thoughts. Over the years, he had built a busy, luxurious life in New York, leaving behind old memories in that modest house. When Lucy called to tell him about their mother's health, he hesitated, half wanting, half resisting the urge to return, though he couldn't fully explain why. Yet Lucy's hints about an inheritance and a box lingered in his mind, refusing to let him rest. What could Mom possibly have? He muttered, a mixture of skepticism and curiosity rising within him. She had lived so simply, yet here they were, faced with a mysterious will. He couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever really understood her at all. On the other side of the country, Claire sat in the airplane cabin, her hand instinctively clutching her purse. Ever since Lucy mentioned their mother's mysterious box, her mind had been spinning with confused thoughts. She wondered if there was actually something valuable left behind. She'd always thought their mother had nothing but that old house. No significant assets. The thought made her feel torn, half doubtful, half curious, yet unable to shake a sense of regret. Michael and Claire had just arrived in town when their phones rang simultaneously. Lucy was on the other end, her voice breaking through sobs. She's gone. Both of them stood in silence, a wave of emptiness and shock hitting them, pressing down with each breath. In that fleeting moment, they realized time could never be turned back, and the things their mother had said about the mysterious box were now secrets forever stilled. After the funeral, the three siblings sat together in the living room, none of them speaking a word. The atmosphere was thick with tension and regret, each of them lost in their own thoughts, none willing to look into each other's eyes. Just then, Mr. Fisher, the family's longtime lawyer, entered the room carrying a worn wooden box and a sealed envelope. He set the box on the table, his expression somber yet understanding. Eleanor left a will, and within this box is everything she wanted the three of you to discover together. The siblings exchanged wary glances, each reminded of their mother's words in her final days. Michael and Claire tried to keep their composure, but the confusion and curiosity were visible in their eyes. Mr. Fisher continued with a serious tone. She lived a simple life, but some things cannot be guessed at. In this box, Eleanor wanted you to find what she had prepared for all three of you. The three sat motionless, staring at the worn wooden box, feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Unanswered questions and everything their mother left behind now lay silently within that box. After the funeral ended, the three siblings remained in the living room of their old family home, facing the box their mother had left. The room was filled with tension and unease, as each was consumed by memories, grudges, and resentment that had festered for years. They weren't just estranged from their mother, they had also grown distant from one another, like strangers bound by nothing but a shared past. Mr. Fisher, the family's lawyer, took a seat across from them, his eyes scanning each face before he began to speak. Before she passed, Eleanor asked me not only to leave this box, but also to explain a few things to you. Mr. Fisher said, his tone calm and steady. She knew there were misunderstandings that were never resolved, and she wanted you to understand that this inheritance isn't just about material things. Michael's mouth twisted in irritation. Misunderstandings? There are no misunderstandings. She left my father to be with someone else, and then he died in an accident right after the divorce. We're not wrong to think that it was all her fault. Lucy lowered her head, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The resentment weighed on her too, though she couldn't deny the confusion that had plagued her all her life, the unanswered questions that loomed over her. Meanwhile, Claire remained silent, staring distantly, her expression as cold as ever. Mr. Fisher sighed deeply, his gaze compassionate. Eleanor wasn't the person you thought she was. Over the years, she quietly saved, invested wisely, and, though she lived simply, accumulated a considerable amount. But her goal wasn't for herself. Eleanor used much of that money to help the community, to support those in need, to provide education for children, and to aid healthcare services in town. The three siblings exchanged looks of disbelief, unable to fully grasp what they were hearing. Michael frowned, suspicious. Are you saying that Mom was giving to charity? Then why didn't she ever tell us? It was her choice. Mr. Fisher replied. Eleanor never wanted to boast about what she was doing, and she knew you resented her. She never explained because she believed that one day you'd find the truth on your own. What about our father? Claire spoke up suddenly, her tone steely. Didn't he die in an accident after the divorce? People said she left him for someone else. We could never forgive her for that. Mr. Fisher looked down, his face thoughtful. This is exactly what Eleanor wanted you to know. The truth is not as simple as the rumors make it out to be. Your father's accident was a tragic event, but it wasn't Eleanor's fault. Michael lowered his head, gripping his hands tightly as long-buried emotions threatened to surface. He wasn't sure how to react or if he could even trust this version of events. Yet, at the same time, a creeping sense of guilt arose within him, realizing he had never truly taken the time to understand his mother. Lucy whispered, "If Mom used her money for charity, then what's in this box?" Mr. Fisher smiled, gently pushing the box toward them. "See for yourselves." Inside, she left not just an inheritance, but also the answers you've been searching for. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small key, which he handed to Lucy. Michael, Claire, and Lucy exchanged glances, each feeling a mix of confusion and conflict. After a brief pause, Michael slowly unlocked the wooden box. Inside lay a stack of aged papers, documents, and carefully arranged notes, along with a handwritten letter bearing Eleanor's neat, familiar handwriting. Lucy took up the letter, her hands trembling slightly, and began to read aloud. "My beloved children, I know you grew up feeling doubt and resentment toward me, and I cannot blame you for that. I understand how powerful rumors can be, and there were things I simply couldn't explain at the time. Your father and I reached a dead end in our marriage long before I made the decision to divorce. I was never involved with anyone else during that time, and I try to help your father understand that. The accident was a terrible misfortune, and I knew you'd think it was all my fault. I accepted that misunderstanding, hoping that time would allow you to see me more clearly. In the years that followed, I devoted myself to doing what I thought was right. The savings I set aside went toward helping those who were struggling, as a way to make peace with myself and with you. But I didn't want to leave behind just money. I wanted you to understand that life is often not what it seems." A silence fell over the room. "For years, we never understood why Mom chose to leave Dad," Claire said, her voice wavering yet steady. "People just kept talking, saying she had someone else. He died right after the divorce. And with everything that happened, we never truly understood why she made that choice." Michael and Lucy sat quietly, Claire's words stirring memories of deep-seated pain. For years, they had harbored doubts and resentment in their hearts. To them, their parents' marriage was a distant yet haunting memory, filled with smiles and warm family dinners, until it all shattered, leaving cracks too deep to mend. Mr. Fisher placed both hands on the table, his gaze somber yet full of understanding. "Eleanor knew you couldn't fully understand, but she still hoped that one day you would listen and accept the truth." He paused, his voice softening to a near whisper. "Your parents' marriage was not a perfect story. They loved each other. That much is true, but life is rarely what we expect. There were issues that had been lingering for a long time, things neither of them could resolve together. Your father was a proud, rigid man, very set in his ways, while your mother was gentle, always wanting to keep the peace. But then things began to change," Mr. Fisher continued, his tone even lower, as if sharing a long-held secret. "Your father faced financial trouble. His business took a turn for the worse, and over time, he grew distant. The pressure, the insecurity, and the disappointment started to drive a wedge between them. There were times he grew angry and said hurtful things, though it wasn't truly his nature." Lucy trembled slightly, while Michael sat silently, the pain clear in his eyes. They had never known that their father had endured so much, nor had they realized what their mother had silently borne. "Mrs. Eleanor didn't abandon your father," Mr. Fisher said, his gaze serious. "She wanted to help him through the hard times, but in the end, she realized they both needed to let go. Your mother hoped that by stepping away, she could relieve some of his burden, giving him a chance to regain his confidence. She thought that separation was the only way for him to stand on his own again. The three siblings sat in silence, emotions swirling within them. They had never imagined the divorce was rooted in love and respect. To them, the separation had always seemed like selfishness, a result of unsolvable conflicts. They hadn't understood that their mother's decision to leave wasn't about abandoning him. It was her attempt to give him a chance to rebuild his life. Mr. Fisher continued, "But unfortunately, soon afterward, your father had the accident. It was a terrible shock for Eleanor, and she blamed herself her entire life for not being able to save him. She knew that you would see it as her fault, but she never wanted that. She accepted your misunderstanding, hoping you wouldn't carry resentment toward your father." Michael lowered his head, clenching his hands as his eyes grew red, struggling to hold back tears. Claire exhaled sharply, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. For the first time, they understood the weight of pain their mother had silently borne, enduring her children's distance just to preserve their father's image. Lucy whispered, her voice trembling, "So, Mom went through all of this alone?" Mr. Fisher nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "She lived a simple, quiet life, never asking for anything. She spent her remaining years making amends in her own way, quietly helping the community, building a small charitable fund from her investments that no one ever knew about. Eleanor didn't just leave you a financial inheritance, she left you a lesson in forgiveness, love, and the sacrifices she made for each of you, as well as for the man she loved until the end." The three siblings sat in a heavy silence, overwhelmed with regret and sorrow. Years of resentment, rumors, and misunderstandings now faded into insignificance. All that remained was the memory of a mother who had silently loved and sacrificed for them, a woman they had never truly had the chance to understand. They continued to sift through the old papers and found a few neatly arranged photographs. They were pictures of the family from their childhood, Eleanor smiling radiantly beside her children, and their father, dressed smartly, his eyes bright with happiness. There were photos from camping trips, family gatherings during holidays, and even simple, everyday snapshots. Each photograph captured a fragment of time, a moment of happiness they had long since forgotten. Michael picked up one of the photos, a nostalgic look crossing his face. He couldn't remember the last time he saw his parents laughing together. In his blurred memories, these photos seemed like pieces of a forgotten past, buried under layers of resentment and misunderstandings. Lucy remained silent, feeling an indescribable emotion welling up inside. "She kept these photos all these years," Claire whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "No matter how far apart we were, she cherished every memory." Lucy continued to look deeper into the box. Beneath the photos lay an envelope, containing a sum of money, around $75,000. It wasn't an enormous amount, but it was more than they had expected. The three siblings looked at each other, astonishment evident on their faces. Despite living a frugal life, their mother had managed to save up such a substantial amount. Mr. Fisher smiled gently, as if anticipating their surprise. Eleanor was careful with every penny she earned, setting aside a portion for small investments and another portion for charitable causes. She never bragged or talked about what she did, but she quietly helped many people in the community. She even had a dream of using her savings to build a children's shelter for the town. But when she discovered her illness, she no longer had the strength to make that dream a reality. Michael, Claire, and Lucy sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The distance, the misunderstandings, and the pain that had lingered for so long now seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of warmth and regret. They understood now that their mother had sacrificed and silently carried so much, and though she never said it, she had always wanted the best for them. Michael looked at the money in the box and spoke softly. "Maybe we should use part of this money to fulfill Mom's dream." Claire nodded, her eyes bright with purpose. "Yes, we can build a place for children, a shelter, something Mom dreamed of her entire life but couldn't complete." Lucy held her siblings' hands, warmth flooding her heart. "Mom didn't just leave us this money. She left us her love, her compassion, and a sense of responsibility to the community. We can carry out her wishes together." The three of them sat there, their faces showing resolve and a sense of newfound happiness. They had not only rebuilt the bond between them, but also decided to bring their mother's dream to life, building a shelter for the town's disadvantaged children. In this way, Eleanor's legacy would be more than just memories. It would live on in the community, in the lives of those she had quietly helped over the years. After deciding to dedicate part of the money to fulfilling their mother's wish, the three siblings set to work planning the children's shelter. They met with community members, learned about the needs of the town, and listened to the stories of children who lacked love and security. Gradually, their vision of a haven for the children took shape in their minds. However, things didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. The shelter required permits and approval from local authorities, a process that demanded time, effort, and no small amount of complicated paperwork. Michael, with his experience as a lawyer, repeatedly tried to negotiate and coordinate with various parties, but progress remained slow. Meanwhile, Claire faced resistance from her own family. Her husband, who wasn't enthusiastic about investing money in nonprofit projects, felt she was wasting her mother's inheritance. "We have 2 kids to think about," he argued during one heated discussion. "We can't just throw away money on something that doesn't benefit our family." Claire felt confused and disappointed, but deep down, she knew this was something she truly wanted to do to honor her mother. The conflict between her family responsibilities and her mother's wishes was a daily struggle, but ultimately, she chose to keep following the path she believed in. Lucy, with her gentle and approachable nature, reached out to the people her mother had once helped. Though Eleanor had quietly gone about her charitable work, those she had aided still remembered and were grateful for her kindness. An elderly woman who had once received Eleanor's assistance in a difficult time embraced Lucy with tear-filled eyes. "Your mother was a wonderful woman," the old lady said. "She gave not just money, but love." These encounters made Lucy feel as if she was following in her mother's footsteps, and her heart filled with determination to see this wish through. She shared her experiences with her brother and sister, hoping they, too, would feel the same conviction. One evening, after a long day, the 3 siblings sat together, exhausted but full of hope. Michael leaned back in his chair, a look of bewilderment on his face. "I never imagined we'd one day sit together for something like this." "Me neither." Claire sighed, then gave a sad smile. "Sometimes, I wish we had understood Mom sooner. Maybe if we knew all that she did, we wouldn't have been so distant from her." Lucy nodded, her voice soft. "But Mom knew. She understood our resentment, but she never blamed us or tried to explain. She simply lived quietly, doing what she believed was right." Michael sat silently for a while, then quietly said, "There's still so much about her that I don't understand. But maybe some things aren't meant to be fully understood. Some things are just meant to be felt." They looked at each other, and for the first time in years, harmony seemed to fill the space where misunderstandings and time had once driven them apart. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "We'll keep going, no matter how hard it gets. Mom left us not only a financial inheritance, but a responsibility. And maybe, somehow, she knew we'd carry it out together." The days that followed brought many challenges, but the shelter gradually took shape. Each brick and door felt like a small step closer to fulfilling their mother's legacy. Sometimes, Claire had to attend late-night meetings to resolve disputes. Michael worked tirelessly to navigate legal matters, and Lucy spent countless hours speaking with townspeople to gather support. When the shelter was finally completed, the 3 of them stood in front of the new building, their hearts full of warmth and pride. They knew that, though their mother was gone, she was still there in every wall, every chair, and in the faces of the children who would soon find refuge there. The opening ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by members of the community. Those who had once received Eleanor's help shared their stories, moving her 3 children deeply. Each memory was like a melody, filling their hearts and soothing years of pain, misunderstandings, and regret. A small girl approached them, shyly holding a wildflower in her hand, which she placed in Lucy's palm. "Thank you for building this place," she said. "My mom said that Mrs. Eleanor was a very good person." Lucy knelt down and hugged the little girl tightly, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she realized that all their sacrifices, struggles, and efforts were truly worth it. Her mother's love had been passed on to them, shining brightly and spreading through each child and every person in the community. As everyone dispersed, the three siblings stayed for a while, watching the shelter under the soft glow of sunset. Michael said softly, "In the end, Mom left us with an invaluable legacy, not of money, but of unity and love." Claire held Lucy's and Michael's hands, her voice trembling. "I think we finally understand Mom more than ever." They sat together, feeling as if they had rediscovered something precious, not just Eleanor's legacy, but also a piece of their own family bond that they had missed for so long. In that moment, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would always have each other, and their mother's legacy would forever be by their side. Sometimes, life takes us through misunderstandings and wounds that seem impossible to mend. Yet family ties, though eroded by time and distance, still quietly burn, waiting to be rediscovered and healed by love and understanding. Eleanor may have passed on, but her greatest legacy was not the savings she left behind. It was the values of kindness, forgiveness, and family unity. Through the journey of fulfilling her wishes together, Michael, Claire, and Lucy realized that a mother's love never fades. It endures, spreads, and shines, becoming a steadfast foundation for those left behind. In the end, they not only rediscovered their mother, but also found themselves and each other. No matter what life held in store, they knew family would always be their true home, containing the values that no material wealth could ever replace.